Joining me first is Dave Levinthal, and he's a senior political reporter and federal politics editor at Center for Public Integrity. Dave, great to have you with us.
Hey, great to be back with you.
All right, so Dave, for the folks who didn't see, what is the Center for Public Integrity?
We're a nonprofit investigative news organization based here in Washington, D.C. We have existed for 30 years, and in our current iteration, we are holding government accountable in pretty much every which way that we can, particularly on the issues of federal politics, state politics, national security, environmental issues, immigration. Those are all key issues, and we don't care if you're on the right or the left. We want to make sure that everyone is doing their job, and we're there to be a watchdog.
Well, I like that kind of talk. Obviously, we're massively in favor of watchdogs. We wish that they would do that. The rest of the media would do that a lot more. So, but you got a new series called Abandoned America. What is that about?
Well, Donald Trump over the summer said that, hey, look, the economy is as good as it's ever been. His administration said that the nation's longstanding war on poverty is largely over and won. So with the backdrop, of course, now being the midterm election, we wanted to investigate places around the country that simply just didn't quite fit into that narrative. It was a very data-driven project that we began early this year, and ultimately we chose 6 places around the country to basically tell the stories of people who had profound political needs, but yet had so very little to show for those needs. Didn't feel like Washington was representing them. Didn't feel as if the current power structure was benefiting them. And ranged the country. We went to Fresno, California, Presidio, Texas, is a very curious border town. We went to North Carolina, which to a town that had been hit by not one but 2 hurricanes, the most recent of which being Florence, and basically felt that the federal government had failed them to a large degree. So ultimately, it was a bit idiosyncratic for us. Usually, we're focused on big money in politics and the people who have power and the billionaires who are funneling money into the system. We wanted to look at the people who had effectively nothing at all and find out what their stories were and tell those stories.
So Dave, I did a video over the weekend because I was greatly frustrated by a Meet the Press segment that NBC had. And they talked about, they of course had no progressives on, as usual. Meet the Press is the single worst organization in media in unbalanced panels. 85% of their panels are tilt right wing. They have more right wing guests and politicians on than they have left wing. It's actually worse than Fox News. And they did it again. They had one conservative, Hugh Hewitt, and they had one pollster who's neutral and 4 reporters, so-called reporters. And so Hugh Hewitt said, oh, the economy's booming, it's doing wonderful. And then Tom Brokaw comes in, who's supposed to be neutral, and backs him up. He says it's an amazing economy. Not a single progressive to talk about it, but forget progressives. No reporter such as yourself to say, hey, wait a minute, wages are actually declining when you take inflation into account. So when you went to these 6 different areas, what's the real America that you guys saw?
So to be clear, I think across the country, you definitely will find plenty of places where the economy is doing quite well and people relatively happy, very, very happy with the way the economy is. But when we went to, for example, St. Louis, unbelievable issues with housing there. When we went to Mississippi, which is a state that ranks right at the bottom for education, and we went to Yazoo City, Mississippi, which is literally one of the worst school districts in the lowest ranked state in the country. We found people who effectively said, we don't know where to turn. We don't know where to go. We can't go anywhere because we don't have enough money to do so. How do we get the help that we need? And this was a story that over a variety of different issues, we were seeing whether it was transportation, education, housing, the border wall, for example. I mentioned Presidio earlier. That was a case of a town that is quite literally reliant for some of its basic necessities of life on its sister city in Mexico, a place called Ojinaga, Mexico. And they feel that if a border wall was built there, if Donald Trump's wall is erected across the border separating Presidio from Ojinaga, it would serve as sort of a mortal wound to the city. It would cut it off from the lifeblood of the back and forth flow of economics and also culture and family that these 2 cities share. So wherever we did go, we found similar stories around different issues in different places around the country that, look, the economy, it might be great somewhere in California or New York or in this part of the country or that, but it's not great here. And we need our federal government to work for us in a better way than they're doing it right now, because it's just not trickling down to us as some would suspect it would be.
So Dave, last thing, and this is important. So, we talked about how the mainstream media, at least from my perspective, misrepresents what's happening in the country. Look, I honestly think because a lot of the anchors are millionaires and they think, well, what do you mean? The stock market's booming, I'm doing great, right? And all the people I know are doing great, but they're not down in St. Louis, they're not down in Texas, they're not seeing the wages declining, et cetera, right? And people suffering. But those people that are suffering from the real economic problems in this country, did you get a sense that they actually understood what the real issues were? Like if they don't have health care, do they understand that it's, if they have Medicare, do they understand that's a government program that has given them that health care? If they don't have health care, do they understand that other countries might be able to have health care, et cetera? Or do they go, I don't have health care, it must be the immigrants' fault?
So it's hard to generalize. And we talk to people who are Trump supporters. We talk to people who hated Donald Trump and lots of people in between. I spent a week plus in Fresno, California, in a particular neighborhood there. And I found a great deal of political sophistication among people who oftentimes didn't have much at all. They were making $15,000, $20,000 a year. They were holding 2-3 jobs, trying to work every which way they could, just simply to make ends meet, and doing so in a situation in a community that had had 50, 60, 70 years worth of bad things happen to it, whether it was real estate redlining or awful transportation situations, environmental issues that would make your skin crawl. They've seen it, especially the people who've been there for much of their lives. But at the same time, too, there was a certain level of political engagement. And even if it wasn't something where they were reading the paper every day and constantly connected to news, they understood that there was a lot at stake in this midterm. So as a result, having conversations with folks like that, it was poignant to hear from them to say, look, we really feel like this country could be better. We feel like our community could be better, but it's going to take more than just talk. It's going to take some sort of action. And a big issue for the people of Fresno, California specifically, was transportation. It was the environment. It was economics, issues that get talked a lot about in Washington, but not necessarily are dealt with on a level that goes back to communities like that have very acute needs for cleanup, movement, be it what it may. They just weren't feeling it, and they haven't for a long time.
So Dave, real quick, and I know this is a funny question, but did you get a sense from those folks, do they like the establishment, neutral to the establishment, or hate the establishment?
And by the establishment, do you mean the power structure in Washington,
yes.
D.C.? Mm-hmm. I think they were sick of everyone in a way, that they felt that the Republicans who are in office right now are working against them, that the Democrats in some cases who were representing them were feckless or ineffective. So there was a sense that, and it was not everywhere, but in many places, where nobody was really working for their interests. They were working for somebody else's interests. Maybe they were working for some sort of special interest, a corporate interest, be it what it may, but it wasn't them. And that's where it really came down to the personal level, as our series, which you can find on publicintegrity.org, will tell you in 27,000 words, that these are people who are living lives of great hope amid what oftentimes is a lot of trouble and a lot of hurdles in their way to getting to a better place for themselves. Yet they were still able to maintain a level of hope that the government would get better for them, that their own situation would be better, that if they just got a hand up, that they would be able to go from point A to point B, which would be a better place for them.
Yeah, I mean, when I say these things on the show about how people don't like Washington, there's a reason why they don't like it. They feel like they're getting screwed. I think they're right, et cetera. I don't do it out of thin air. I do it based on good reporting like this. And that's because every reporter that goes and actually talks to those Americans in those smaller towns, different areas that aren't normally covered, comes back with the same result. So it's a great series. Everybody check it out at publicintegrity.org. Dave Levinthal, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks very much.
Like what you see? I hope so. Thank you. So click the subscribe button below and don't forget to ring the bell to never miss another video from Rebel HQ.